All right, what's going on YouTube? This is Boxingwave, and we are back with another fight breakdown. This Saturday, December 6th, Oshaki Foster is going to be defending his WBC super featherweight title. That's at 126 against Stephen Fulton. It's going to be on PBC, pay-per-view, Amazon Prime, and I will be covering the entire card live. All right, so if you are new here, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification button. I will be here live. And if you enjoy the content, do me that favor, hit the thumbs up for me real quick. All right. Stephen Fulton is going to be moving up from 126 and facing and challenging Oshaki Foster. Stephen Fulton is currently the featherweight, the 126 WBC champion. He's moving up there. Now, I don't know if he's holding his title. If he loses, I don't know if he's going to go back down. I really don't know. But from what he's saying, he's planning on staying at 130, win or lose, right? I did hear him say that in an interview when this fight was supposed to happen before. All right. This was actually on the undercard of Keith Thurman and Sebastian Fundora, but that fight was canceled because Fundora suffered some kind of injury. All right, and that was that. But this fight is on the undercard of Lamont Roach and Pitbull Cruz. I have not done a breakdown. That will be my very next breakdown. That will be the last breakdown that I'm doing for this card. And I already did an Eris Landy Lara Janovic breakdown. So if you didn't see that, make sure you check that video out. I did that last week. All right, so this fight, you got Shockey Foster is 32 years old. All right, 23 wins, 12 knockouts, 3 losses. All right. It's been pro since 2014, something like that, 2012, 2020, 2014. He's been a pro for a little longer, right? But he's been a champion since he beat Ray Vargas at 130, and he's been defending the title since then. Had 2 fights with Robson Conceição last year. He lost the first one, lost his title, but won it back a few months later in the rematch. That fight, talk a little bit about that fight. Kind of tricky on the decision. Some people think Shot got robbed in the first one. Some people think Conceição did better in the rematch, which he lost. I think the judges might have got that one wrong, but it is what it is. Um, but yeah, no, he's been defending the title for some. He had a fight with Ray Vargas, which was probably his best performance. That's what really put a lot of eyes on him. And then you had one of the best fights of the year against Rocky Hernandez. I think that was back in 2023, where they had the best round of the year in the 11th round. And then the 12th round was where he stopped Rocky Hernandez. Since then, he fought Abraham Nova. And then he went on to fight Robson Conceição twice in 2024. So he's been pretty active for the most part. He's a top ranked fighter. But he's fighting on a PBC card. So is Janovic as well, top ranked fighter fighting on a PBC card. We know that Top Rank is no longer with ESPN. All right. As far as the height, he's listed as 5'8.5", 5'8.5", with a 72-inch reach. But standing face to face to Stephen Fulton, they look like they're roughly around the same height. I don't know if there's a difference because of the shoes they're wearing or anything like that. But when they're standing face to face, they look like they're around the same size, right? Stephen Fulton, 31 years old. He's 1 year younger. He's been boxing pro for maybe 2 years less than Oshaki Foster, but he has 23 wins as well, with only one defeat, with 8 knockouts, no draws. Um, he has slightly less of a reach, all right, and he's pushing to become a 3 division champion. Now, I heard this somewhere. I don't know if it was in an interview. I can't remember where I heard it. It might have been in an interview, but from what I heard that Stephen Fulton, if he is to win this fight, he'll be the first 3 division champion from Philadelphia era, like ever. Um, and I didn't fact check that, but there's a lot of boxing. There's a lot of you know Philly fighters that are legends, right? And I can't think of a name off top that's from Philly that actually won more than 2 divisions. All right. If there is one, let me know in the comments. I know B Hop was, undisputed. I mean, he's probably the best, one of the best of all time from Philly, but he's only won He's only fought at 160 or 175. All right, he didn't even fight at 168. All right, and he was a champion in both of those divisions. So if if I'm wrong about that, fact check me in the comments. But I think that because of that reason alone, I think it's worth the challenge for Fulton to move up and fight Shock. Okay, because historically he will be doing something that has never been done in the city of Philly. He may not be the most legendary, but he will have something that no one else has in the city of Philly. All right. And he's a former unified champion at 122, right? Career 122 guy. He moved up to 126 recently after losing to Naoya. In a way, he's only had two fights there. He beat Carlos Carjas, and then he went on to beat Brandon Figueroa in their rematch in one of the best fights of that year in the first fight, down at 122. Very controversial. A lot of people thought Figueroa won the first fight, but he went and beat him in great fashion earlier this year. And he went viral because he was rocking the jean shorts and the Timbs. So from a culture standpoint, it was fire seeing that. All right, but that rematch was earlier this year. But he's only fought twice at 126. And he did win a title in that fight in his last fight. But he didn't necessarily beat any of the other champions. I think that fight was either like a vacant title or if it was an elevator. I know Brandon had recently moved up to 126 as well. So it wasn't much proven there at 126. He had a fight with Carlos Castro. I'm sorry, I said Carges. Carlos Castro. Carlos Castro. Carlos Castro. It was his first fight up. And it was a tough fight. You know, I think that fight could have gone either way, to be honest. First view, and I kind of thought Castro edged it. He did drop Fulton in that fight, and then he did hurt him as well later on in the fight as well. Tough fight. So even though he beat Figueroa at 126, there wasn't really much there. It's not been much like really, really solid at 126 because he never unified. And there's a lot of good fighters at 126 that he just never faced. So to go up to 130 to fight O'Shaquie Foster, excuse me, who's been fighting at 130 for some time now and has fought above the division. He's fought at 135 and 140 as well. It's kind of risky, you know what I mean? And Fulton's not the biggest puncher, and it's not like he looks stronger at 126. So it's a risky fight for him, but it's a good fight. It's a good fight. And stylistically, the styles is a big deal because I said this on one of the recent lives that I had. They're both they're two black slick fighters from America. Okay. And when you look at their resume, you're not going to see that many of the same kind of style. You know what I mean? I think with Shockey, I think you're going to get some of that when you see Robson Conceição, because with all the experience that he got and his style, you're going to get a little bit of that there. You're going to get a little bit of that in the Abraham Nova fight, but not quite like the way Stephen Fulton puts it together, you know? And then with Stephen Fulton, you just don't have it at all. If you want to see someone that's similar, I think surprisingly, Naoya Inoue had a similar style in that fight because of the way he fought Fulton. He was very slick in that fight, even though Naoya Inoue is not viewed as that. He can fight at that style and actually was better in Fulton in that fight. Also, you can probably go back to maybe the Adam Lopez fight. Adam Lopez, I know he's Latino. I'm not sure if he's Mexican or not. I know he's an American fighter and got like some slickness to him. I think, going back to that fight, you can see a little bit of that. But there's nothing there that's really similar between the two. You got two guys that are defensively responsible, that are phenomenal counterpunchers, that are really athletic, got sharp reflexes. You got a lot of the same tools coming into the fight. But with that being said, they don't fight exactly the same, Now, when I think of Stephen Fulton, I think he's quicker. I think he's lighter on his feet. He's more likely to fight, at a high guard. He's not like a Philly shell type of fighter. Like he could fight that way, but that's not where his strength is and stance. Whereas Shocky Fulton is more like he goes into a high guard, but he switches stances. He could fight orthodox. He could fight southpaw. He switches throughout the fight, and he uses that Philly shell defense stance in his fight, and he does it really well. Um, so yeah, they're two slick fighters, but they don't fight exactly the same. When I mentioned Fulton's speed, even though I believe he's quicker, I don't think he was as quick as he was at 122 and his, the undefeated version of himself. When you look at the Daniel Roman fight, was probably his best performance going into the Naoya Inoue fight. I would say that that is the best version. That was probably the best performance of Stephen Fulton, and he had really quick hands. When I watch him at 126, even though he's still very quick and twitchy, the extra weight probably was more solid, probably was stronger, but I don't, I didn't think he was quicker, and I think going to 130 now, he's probably not going to be as quick, but he's still got very fast hands, right? As far as their games, I mean, they both, you know, like Stephen Fulton's been in there with a lot of guys that were good skill boxers and that were pressure fighters. We seen him in wars with Brandon Figueroa, for example. The first fight was a war. We seen him in there with Angelo Leo, which was a war. We seen him in tough fights like the one I mentioned earlier with what's his name, Adam Lopez. Where he got hurt in that fight. We seen him in there with good boxers like Naoya Inoue and Carlos Castro. Carlos Castro did a good work on him with the jab. Fulton got out jabbed, and at points in that fight he was getting outboxed too. So we seen him in there with fighters that he was kind of just boxing and looking for the counter. But we seen him in there with some dog fights where he had to fight off the ropes, had to fight in the pocket. And we seen a little bit of both. Same thing with Shocky Foster. I mean, like he probably wasn't as popular, because until the Ray Vargas fight, people really wasn't that familiar. I know I wasn't really that familiar before that fight. But you had a guy like Ray Vargas, very tall Mexican fighter with very fast hands, good counter puncher, good body attacker, and everything. Um, and is also quick, and I mean, Shockey was able to just break him down, like stylistically, just technically was just counter punching was on point. The distance, like everything he did, even on the inside when he began to walk Ray Vargas down. I think Vargas, Foster's been in there with the Rocky Hernandezes who gave him, pushed him, had a lot of volume, was very physical, came forward, forced Shockey to fight on his back foot. So you see him in fights like that. And you see him fights with Abraham Nova, who's very very tricky in early parts of that fight, and force Oshaki to adjust. And then same with Robson Casasal. He had to adjust, switch his stances, switch his style, switch the pace. And that's what you're getting with Shocky Foster. I'm not gonna lie, he definitely been in a few stinkers. Like not. It really depends. And I say the same thing about Shakur Stevenson. I think Shakur Stevenson would look better in fights where he's fighting someone that's more aggressive and that's willing to play into his advantages. And I think Oshaki's the same. The thing is with Oshaki Foster is that he continues to change the pace per round. So he might come out as an orthodox fighter, like against what's his name, Abraham Nova, right? He comes out, he's fighting orthodox. He's trying to set things up. He's trying to counter, and then he doesn't like how things are going, so he switches southpaw. And then again he changed his style again. He might go back orthodox, and then at some point he'll fight out of a high guard and walk you down, and start bullying, start putting pressure on you, and start fighting more of a phone booth type of fight. But he's still countering. He's keeping his hands up. One thing about him, when he hooks, he always keeps that phone up. Like he's good. He's sharp when it comes to that. And Fulton is too. Fulton can do the same. But I feel like even though both of these guys are not KO artists, I feel like Oshaki Foster is a bigger puncher and he's the bigger guy fighting at 130. Like, you know what I mean? Like I said earlier, he's fought at 130 and above 130. But at the highest level, he's only fought at 130. You know, Fulton is moving up. And you gotta wonder, being that he's never been a puncher before, um, how is he gonna deal with, or how is he gonna slow down Shock, who can come forward? And that's the thing with Shock. Shock is a guy, I think, like one of the biggest flaws with him is that he takes a while to get it going. You know, like a lot of his fights, I think he looks worse in the earlier half of the fight. You know, sometimes he's not doing enough. He's being too defensive. He's always jumping back, you know, and resetting himself, jumping back to get out of the way of shots. Got good defense, got good reflexes, but at the same time, he's taking too long to get it going, you know, and that's how some of his fights where he's down, you know, in some of these fights. And I think here, like, it might be a problem because I do think that Fulton is better when it comes to activity. Yeah, Fulton is a counterpuncher too, but he's gonna initiate more. You know, he's gonna throw more jabs than Oshaki Foster. You know, I'm expecting him to. You know, he's gonna stab you to the body a lot. He's gonna be doing those kind of things and coming over with that, you know, overhand right. And Fulton, he's been in there. You know, being that Foster is a switcher. Fulton has been in there with southpaws, but not no elite, you know, elite southpaws. Like he's been in there with like Brandon Figueroa is a guy that switches constantly, you know, because he likes to switch and give you different angles. You know, he likes to be unpredictable and he's a high value puncher. He doesn't fight like Shock. You know, Shock is totally different. He goes into southpaw and he stays there for rounds at a time. You know, he sticks to whatever stance is more beneficial towards him. So with that being said, yeah, Fulton's been in there with southpaws, but not one on this level. You know, he hasn't been in there with a southpaw on this level too. You know, Shockey's been in there with guys that's a little bit more similar to Fulton, more so than the other way around. You know, so as far as my prediction, man, um, you know, I did talk about it the other day, and I told you guys, you know, let me do my breakdown. I mean, let me do my film study because I had not done any film study leading up to this fight until today. You know, I put in a lot of time. I watched at least 5 fights a piece today, and you know, as close and as either way, and I was definitely leaning towards Fulton winning this fight. I just think that Ashaki is the safer pick because I think he can win in more ways, right? I think he can win on points. I think he can beat a bully. I think he can hurt Fulton. I think he can stop Fulton. I just think he can win in more ways. And when you see a fighter that is defensive like him and really technical, yeah, I think he's going to give rounds away to Fulton. Fulton's going to win rounds based off activity for sure. Foster, sometimes he'd be looking for the perfect punch. But I can't dismiss on the kind of work he puts in on the second half of his fights. You just can't dismiss it. You know, when I'm talking about Conceição, when I'm talking about Nova, I'm talking about Rocky Hernandez. Once he really gets it going, and once he's figured you out, like I think he's gonna push forward and command the fight. Fulton is gonna be slick, quick. He's gonna be moving, but at some point, it's gonna become a little dogfight, you know. And I think, especially if Foster is struggling early on, Foster is gonna try to walk him down. But he's not going to walk him down in the way that Figueroa normally does his opponents. No, he's going to walk him down, and you know he's going to be framing. He's going to he's going to be using his forearms, and he's going to be doing the head control. He's going to be probing. He's going to be doing a lot of that technical stuff to land the right shots. He's not going to just be wasting punches. You know, he's going to be digging to your body. He's going to be throwing uppercuts, whatever you're available. You know, especially with Fulton is usually moving his upper body a lot with his hands up, Foster is going to be more accurate. You know, I just think that, again, I have to go with Foster because I just think he can win in more ways. I think when it comes to Fulton, I think he could definitely win with his speed and his activity. And also, and I hate to say this, but I got to be real. This is a PBC card. You know what I mean? It is. It is a PBC card, and we don't know how that's gonna go. Fulton's been a PBC fighter for years. So if it's a close fight, which it could be, I could see the decision going to Fulton. But if I'm really looking at the two fighters and what they can do based off their ability and based on how things could look in the second half of this fight, I gotta go with Shock. Again, I don't know exactly how he's gonna win. I see that the odds today is pretty much even. But I already put my money down and I'm picking Shock to win straight up. I'm not gonna go with knockout because I'm not sure if he's gonna knock out Fulton. Because Fulton's been hurt, but he's recovered. You know what I mean? Like outside of the Inoue fight, he's been hurt, he's been rocked, he's been down, but he's been good at recovering. But I just don't see him winning this fight. I think Shock is going to be better. I think he's going to have the success early, but Shock is going to push forward and be the bigger dog late. All right. So I got Shocky Foster winning this one. I'm putting my money on him winning straight up. All right. And that's it. All right. So let me know what you guys think on this fight. And I'll see you guys Saturday. All right. I'll have the breakdown for the what's the other fight? Roach and Pitbull. Roach and Pitbull. I'll have that one out next. Y'all have a good day. Peace.